I'm just a normal kid.
Oh, Eric, you're a normal kid who killed your parents.
I didn't have normal experiences, but I am. There's not a day that goes by that I don't think about what happened and wish that I could take that moment back.
It's been 30 years since the trial of the Menendez brothers gripped the nation. And now, 3 decades after Lyle and Eric gunned down their parents at the family's posh Beverly Hills mansion, the Menendez brothers could get another shot at a new trial, thanks in part to a former member of the boy band Menudo. Lawyers for the pair claim that some newly uncovered evidence supports the original defense used at trial by the Menendez brothers back in the 90s. Paperwork was filed this month arguing that a jury may not have sentenced Lyle and Eric to life in prison without parole had they been presented with this significant evidence at trial. Now, some might see this as a flimsy argument. If their defense didn't work the first time, why would more of the defense make a difference now? Well, in this instance, it might make a huge difference for the Menendez brothers and possibly lead to these two being set free at some point. The Menendez brothers admit that they murdered their parents, but their trial was still not a slam dunk for the prosecution. In 1993, Lyle and Eric were tried with separate juries for killing their parents, Jose and Kitty. Both of those juries deadlocked, and the case ended in a mistrial. 2 years later, the state tried the case again. This time, the brothers were co-defendants with one jury tasked to determine their fate. They were found guilty of 2 counts of first-degree murder with special circumstances of lying in wait, as well as 1 count of conspiracy to commit murder. For those crimes, the brothers received 2 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. Now, it is a fact that Lyle and Eric Menendez killed their parents. They have admitted it. But the reason the first juries deadlocked was because of their convincing defense at the first trial, one that was prohibited in the second. Lawyers for the Menendez brothers said that the boys shot their parents because they had suffered years of sexual abuse at the hands of their father, and their mother knew about it and allowed it to happen. Attorneys for Eric and Lyle now say that they have found more evidence of this abuse, and they want the case to be retried again. As they put it in court documents, in determining if this was an imperfect self-defense case of manslaughter or a case of premeditated murder, jurors had one critical factual question to decide: were Eric and Lyle victims of sexual abuse? 2 huge pieces of evidence have come to light recently to bolster the Menendez brothers' claims that they were violently sexually abused by their father for years. A letter that Eric Menendez wrote to his cousin Andy several months before the shooting has been unearthed. Now, the description of the abuse in the letter, it's not explicit, it's implied, but it does mark a contemporaneous account of what was going on in black and white. I've been trying to avoid Dad. It's still happening, Andy, but it's worse for me now. I can't explain it. He's so overweight that I can't stand to see him. I never know when it's going to happen, and it's driving me crazy. Every night I stay up thinking he might come in. I need to put it out of my mind. I know what you said before, but I'm afraid. You just don't know Dad like I do. He's crazy. He's warned me 100 times about telling anyone, especially Lyle. The second piece of new information comes from an unlikely source, a former member of the boy band Menudo named Roy Rossello. Now, I want to warn you that I will be discussing graphic descriptions of sexual abuse and violence. Last year, Rossello participated in a documentary for Peacock called Menendez and Menudo Boys Betrayed. In it, he accuses Jose Menendez of raping him in the mid-'80s when he was 13 or 14 years old. Back then, Jose Menendez was a big-time music executive for RCA, and the label had signed the Latin boy band. This is what Roy Rossello claims happened. During a trip to New York City around 1983 or 1984, he was instructed to go meet Jose Menendez in a limousine outside of the hotel that the band was staying at. He was then taken by Jose to a home in New Jersey, plied with alcohol, and anally raped. After losing consciousness sometime during the assault, he woke up back in his hotel with visible injuries from being sodomized. In a separate incident, Roy says Jose forced oral sex on him in a bathroom before raping him again later that night. A new 2023 jury presented with this new evidence of sexual abuse may be more likely to vote for manslaughter versus murder. As Lyle told Daily Mail a few years back, The culture has shifted when it comes to this kind of abuse, and it's more understanding today than they were in 1993 of its victims.
I think the culture is sort of changing and understanding what the ramifications of sexual abuse in families are, especially when it comes to boys. And, so I feel like there's been a little more acceptance of understanding the childhood that Eric and I went through.
On an August night in 1989, 21-year-old Lyle Menendez and his 19-year-old brother Eric claimed that they got into a confrontation with their parents over Eric's continued sexual abuse by Jose. When the fight reached a boiling point, the boys grabbed 12-gauge shotguns, entered their family's den, and began firing at random. Jose was shot 6 times by his sons, with the fatal blow a shot to the back of his head. Kitty was shot 10 times total. The first 9 didn't kill her, and Lyle actually went outside to reload his weapon before coming back in and finishing her off. The trial of these two gripped the nation. Everything about it was compelling. You have this incredibly affluent family living in a mansion in the most famous zip code in America, 90210. Jose Menendez had a ton of money. Kitty was a stay-at-home mom. Lyle was going to Princeton University. Eric was a nationally ranked tennis player. These people looked like they had it all. Now, at the time of the shooting, Jose and Kitty were renting a 6-bedroom, 8-bathroom, 9,000 square foot home in Beverly Hills worth millions, while their main residence was under renovation. Both Lyle and Eric Menendez took the stand at trial in their own defense. They gave heart-wrenching testimony in front of the jury about the sexual abuse that they say they sustained at the hands of their parents, the very people who were supposed to protect them. Lyle fell apart on the stand, talking about how he was just 6 years old when his father began molesting him. While explaining the most graphic details of the rapes, he broke down in tears. Lyle said Jose abused him between the ages of 6 and 8, and Eric told the jury he was abused for far longer, right up until the killings. According to the brothers, around the same time that Jose stopped abusing Lyle, he started abusing Eric. Eric testified that he was molested and raped repeatedly by Jose from the time he was 6 years old until he was 18. Recounting the sustained sexual abuse brought Eric to tears as well. He told the jury graphic, horrific descriptions of the incestuous relationship that he had with his dad, who he said would sometimes stick needles and tacks into his skin during sex to toughen him up. He testified that he finally admitted what was going on to Lyle, and he wanted it to stop. The brothers told the jury that they confronted their father together 3 days before the shooting, and they threatened to expose him. Then, the night of August 20th, shortly before things would turn fatal, Eric says that his dad ordered him upstairs. Eric and Lyle's recollections of what precipitated the shootings were basically exactly the same. Their testimony was this, that Eric believed that his father planned to have sex with him one last time before killing him. Lyle stepped in to protect Eric, and an argument erupted. Their parents went into a closed room, and the brothers believed that there were weapons inside. It was at that moment that they grabbed shotguns that had been purchased by Eric, and they stormed into the den, killing their parents. Witnesses were called to corroborate all of the abuse testimony in the first trial. A cousin named Diane testified that when she was 16 and Lyle was 8, he told her about his father's abuse. Diane said under oath that she confronted Kitty about this, and Kitty appeared to punish Lyle. Another cousin, Andy, the same one from the letter, testified at trial that when Eric was 13, he told Andy about being molested. Several others took the stand to testify to witnessing all sorts of mental and physical abuse that the Menendez boys were subjected to as children. There was also testimony about a rule in the Menendez home. When Jose Menendez was in the bedroom with one of the boys, no one was allowed to walk down the hallway past the bedrooms. The defense claimed that the brothers didn't kill their parents for even revenge. Rather, they were in fear for their life. Now, the abuse testimony was enough to put reasonable doubt into the minds of 2 juries in 1993. But in the retrial, the abuse, the defense, the witnesses, none of it was allowed in, so the jury never heard it. Instead, they believed the state's theory that it was the Menendez family's $14 million fortune that motivated the brothers to callously snuff out the life of their parents. The prosecution did have a fair amount of evidence to support this, too. After killing their mom and dad, Lyle and Eric were not keeping a low profile. For months, these two were spending money like it was going out of style. After Jose and Kitty were shot, Lyle and Eric stayed at the house for a bit in case anyone heard the gunshots, and had called the police. Then they drove up to Mulholland Drive, this winding road throughout the canyons in LA, where they dumped their weapons and then disposed of their bloody clothes in a gas station trash can. Then they tried to establish an alibi. The brothers bought tickets to see Batman at a local theater, and when enough time had passed to make their alibi plausible, they returned home and Lyle called 911.
What's the problem? What's the problem? I'm trying to kill my parents.
Lyle and Eric were not suspects, and they were treated by law enforcement on the scene like grieving sons who had just made the traumatic and shocking discovery of their parents' bloody, lifeless bodies on the floor of the den. The Menendez brothers wouldn't be arrested until 7 months after the murders. Part of what alerted investigators to their potential involvement was their reckless spending. These two bought a Jeep, a Porsche, a restaurant, a Rolex, thousands of dollars worth of designer clothes, went on luxury vacations, hired a pricey private tennis coach, and rented 2 adjoining condos right on the water in Marina Del Rey. They burned through about $700,000 in 7 months. Now, police became suspicious of the brothers, and Eric eventually confessed the crime to his shrink, who recorded it. The shrink told his mistress, the mistress told the cops. Now, in court, prosecutors said the murders came down to greed, plain and simple. The defendants, though, they maintained and still do that the killings were motivated by fear for their lives. In their request for a new trial, lawyers for the Menendez brothers argue that the new evidence not only shows that Jose Menendez was very much a violent and brutal man who had sexually abused children, but it strongly suggests that, in fact, he was still abusing Eric Menendez as late as December 1988, just as the defense has argued all along. The district attorney is considering the Menendez brothers' request for a new trial. And for the latest on that, go to dailymail.com.